Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2016 horror slasher film Terrifier. Now, I know I am super late to the party when it comes to sharing my thoughts on this film or this franchise, but better late than never. Now, this is a film that when it came out, it surprised a lot of people. It got a lot of good marks critically, and it started to honestly earn a pretty instantaneous fan base, especially for the character of Art the Clown. And I definitely get that. The performance by Thornton as Art the Clown is honestly pretty incredible, especially when you look at the fact that this is a character who doesn't say a word. That's some difficult stuff to pull off, and Thornton does a really good job bringing that character to life. But to me, this is just a below average slasher. It's kind of forgettable and honestly kind of generic. Other than Art the Clown and some gore, there's not much there when it comes to Terrifier. And even the director and the writer himself, Damien Leone, even he's like, yeah, I wish I did more with this film. I wish I had more character depth and development, did a better job with the script. And I agree with him because as it is, it's just it's not awful, but it's just below average for me. It's the kind of generic below average cheap slasher that I've seen a million times. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it definitely does feel like that when it comes to this genre. There's a ton of films like Terrifier that you'll find on Tubi to stream for free. And Thornton's efforts as art and the gore, it's not enough for me to honestly say that it's a gem, but it is a successful instance of a proof of concept. And I think that's really what this is. It's Damien showing people that art can work as a lead in a horror franchise. Maybe it's not a great film right off the bat, but the character works enough that if things are better, if you have a better script, if you have better direction, you have a better story, then this character can really be something special and can actually carry a new franchise. And with Terrifier 2, for instance, and Terrifier 3, those two definitely prove that is genuinely the case. Like, this is a character that is strong enough to do that. But because it's just a proof of concept kind of movie, it's just kind of there. Uh for the most part. It's directed by Damien Leone, and he directed a couple other films prior to this. He did Frankenstein versus the Mummy and All Hallows Eve, as well as a short film called Terrifier, which I think was the first time he directed something featuring Art the Clown as a character, because Art the Clown is his baby. This is his creation. He's been trying to get people to take notice of this character for a long time. The first time he made an appearance was in that short. He was also in a segment in All Hallows Eve. And so it's definitely a character that he has a lot of passion for. And that really does show when it comes to the scenes featuring art. This film is at its best when it comes to Damien directing Art the Clown. When he's directing anything else, it's not very good. But when it comes to him directing Art the Clown, it works. It seems like he all of a sudden figures out how to frame his shots properly. The camera angles are more interesting. The usage of pans and zooms is better. But when it comes to the other stuff featuring other characters or other settings or other things that don't involve art, it's just not really that great. I think some of that is also due to the fact that it's a very low budget film. This movie was almost not even made. He tried to finance this on Indiegogo, but it didn't meet its goal. And the only reason why I was able to finance enough to even finish this movie, let alone start shooting it, is because he got an outside investor who was also one of the producers of the film. And even with that, it's still at most like a $55,000 movie. So there's a lot of limitations with that. And I think that definitely does show when it comes to the direction. It shows when it comes to other production values. You can't do as much with the lighting. You can't do as much with the camera. You can't do as much with the setting. It has to be very limited and mostly in like one space, which in this instance, it's mostly in the apartment complex or the garage. So there's not really a lot you can do with that as a filmmaker because it's just so limiting when it comes to the space that you're shooting in. And so that just makes your limitations as a filmmaker even more evident. I think a more accomplished, skilled filmmaker could make those type of small spaces into something that is a lot more striking visually. But Damien really isn't at that point yet in his career. So there's just a lot of stuff with these shots, with these small, tight spaces that is just boring to look at. Um, and I don't think he gets the best performances out of his cast other than Thornton playing Art. I think a better director could maybe enable some of these actors and actresses to elevate their performances a little bit more. You definitely don't get any of that when it comes to the direction. And like I said, it's not like the strongest, most dynamic film visual wise. There's some decent looking shots here and there that show flashes of what Damien could be as a filmmaker, but there's not enough of it and there's not a lot of it. So a lot of the time it just winds up becoming a film that just looks every bit of what it is. A very low budget proof of concept film that in a lot of ways is just a short that's extended to an hour and 20 minutes. Now, Damien also wrote the film, and I think he deserves some credit and some kudos for some aspects of this script. For one, there are some different sort of things that he does with Art the Clown that I do like. I love the fact that he creates his own weapons. I think that's a fun idea. And I think it's executed fairly well. I also like the fact that he's willing to use guns. That's definitely unexpected when it comes to the slasher genre and adds a nice little twist on things when it comes to the genre as a whole. You have a slasher villain who now is willing to use guns, and don't mind how it handles the final girl stuff. It makes you think it's going to go one way, but then it goes a different way. And then by the end, there really isn't a final girl. I kind of appreciated that. Even though it did kind of hurt the film a little bit, though, because it kind of makes things feel a little pointless. Because at the end, Art never really gets defeated. He just defeats himself, and then it doesn't matter anyway because he's supernatural. So he just resurrects himself at the end. So it just feels kind of pointless. And it's almost like it's just a setup for the twist that, oh, the disfigured lady at the beginning who attacks the reporter and kills her is the same lady. It's Victoria. And you're like, okay, all right. But it's just one of those things where it's a bit tacky. But I do like the opening. I think it's a striking way to open up the film, and I like how uh, Damien introduces Art the Clown with him suiting up and getting ready. It reminded me a lot of a similar scene in Freddy's Dead when Freddy is creating his glove and he's preparing for to do his worst. I think there's also another one in I think it was Freddy versus Jason, which had another scene like that. So there's a lot of stuff that reminds me of some other films, other slashers that I've seen. But I think there was enough of a twist on things to make it uniquely Art and something that really was Art's own sort of suiting up montage that I felt it worked. Now the characters though, they're not very good, and even Damien would admit that. He said that the character development is not really where he would personally want it to be. And a lot of that is because he just had to get something out there. He had to get this film done with a very low budget so we could show people that this character in Art the Clown could work. And that's why you have Terrifier 2. That's why you have Terrifier 3. So in a lot of ways, even though I'm not super big on this script, I appreciate it because it's still at the end of the day a successful proof of concept. It shows that Art the Clown as a character is strong enough and interesting enough and compelling enough in his own way, even with this limited film, that if you gave him something more to work with, you could have something with some genuine potential. Now, when it comes to the kills, which this film got a lot of praise for when it came out, they're really not that great, other than the bit where Dawn is sawed in half while she's being hung upside down with a hacksaw. Because prior to that, you have this scene at a pizzeria where Art is messing with the two girls, Dawn and Tara, and the girls leave. Then Art decides to kill the pizzeria owner and this other guy who works there. It cuts one guy's hand off, but it's not a very convincing effect. And then he like stabs him a bunch more times. Then he kills this other guy off screen and turns his head into a jack-o'-lantern. Which that bit I'm like, yeah, it's not a bad looking effect, but it's just an old hat of a concept. Like we've seen that a ton of times in slasher films where somebody turns a severed head into a jack-o'-lantern. I even think there was a more unique twist on that in the Child's Play remake of all things, to be honest. So you have that. So like even that like bit is like not really that amazing or that great. If you're a gore hound and you're really into the gore and you're wanting to watch this for the gore, it's all done practically, but it's not really that memorable. And it's not that interesting or unique in terms of the way that he does the kill or kills in that particular scene. And to be fair, the whole upside down hacksaw, not necessarily super unique either, because the mutilator did something similar. But I just think it's the most well executed scene because of just the horror of it. I mean, having your best friend be hung up upside down and then cut in half in front of you while she's still alive, that's pretty fucked up and intense. And there is some genuine tension that starts to build once the girls are stranded and they're there in the middle of nowhere, and Tara winds up going into the abandoned apartment complex, and she winds up becoming targeted by Art the Clown. Art winds up taking her friend Dawn out of the car and then ties her up, strings her up and then cuts her in half. Art winds up killing this other guy who works at the apartment complex, who's friends with the exterminator Mike, and he cuts his head off in a pretty good looking effect. And then the final girl that you think is going to be the one that's going to best Art in the end, and Tara, winds up getting shot to death by Art. And that was definitely a shocking moment in the script. First off, did not expect Art to use a gun, so I think that is definitely something that Leone deserves a lot of credit for when it comes to coming up with that. And second, I didn't really expect Tara to die at that point. So now it's Victoria who is now set up to become the new lead, the new final girl, who is Tara's older sister, who was supposed to pick her and her friend up at the apartment complex, but showed up too little, too late. So now she's being stalked by Art. Mike is helping her out. She winds up attacking Art with his own weapon, which is this cat o' nine tails. Mike knocks him out, but of course, Art, he can take a licking, so he gets back up, takes out Mike, then starts going after Victoria, winds up hitting her with a truck, and he starts tearing her up, and then I think he starts eating her face. The cops show up. They hold Art at gunpoint, essentially. And instead of turning himself into the cops, he shoots himself, which is another bit that I didn't necessarily see coming that I want to give the writer credit for. But then a lot of that's just kind of undone by the, "Oh, he's supernatural," and he resurrects himself in the coroner's office and then kills the medical examiner, and now he's alive, and now things are set up for the sequel, and there's this twist that the disfigured lady at the beginning who killed the reporter, it's Victoria. And even that's kind of a letdown because if the script was better when it comes to making Victoria feel like a more fleshed out character, then it would be a hell of a lot more tragic and ultimately more compelling. But as it is, it's just a twist. It doesn't really have as much of an impact. And Tara's death doesn't have as much of an impact as it could. Neither does Dawn, because you barely know these characters. And I don't really feel that they have enough personality and charm when it comes to the actresses playing these characters to make up for the lack of character development, which happens with other slashers, where there's not a ton of character development in depth, but the performers, they make up for it with their personality and their charisma. I don't really feel that way about this cast, other than the actor playing Art the Clown. It doesn't help either that there's a lot of this stuff that's just straight up filler. The stuff involving this woman who is squatting at the apartment complex, who's crazy. Like, we didn't need that. I know why it's there to set something up where Art can do that weird, demented, creepy scene where he's wearing her hair as a wig and her chest and walking around and messing with Victoria's head, and it is a pretty demented, twisted scene, but, like, it's not necessarily demented or twisted enough that it necessarily had to be there. So there's a lot of stuff in this that just really does feel like we gotta make this an hour and 20 minutes, just throw something in there with a crazy lady who is living in the apartment complex. Um, there's also some weird stuff tonally. Sometimes the humor works, other times not so much, especially when it comes to some of the stuff that the two girls are doing. Like, there's a lot of lines that just come across as very awkward and forced and not funny. And then there's this weird, I wouldn't say obsession, but there's definitely this weird thing that Damien has that involves fecal matter. There's even a bit where Art like writes his name in feces on the bathroom wall at the pizzeria, and maybe he's trying to do something a little bit different here too by tapping into some kind of fear of fecal matter. But to me, that's just too lowbrow. It's such a lowbrow thing. Oh, poop! I just don't really feel that that's something that is really inherently scary. So I appreciate him trying to go there with it, but I don't think anyone can make that work, especially when there are films like Monster that exist. But that is something that is a bit puzzling for me. But like I said, the script, it's not the best script in the world, but it is a decent template for some carnage, courtesy of Art the Clown. And so if that's really where this ultimately works for you, I get it. I get how some people can watch this and just be like, well, it just works because Art the Clown is cool and the actor does a good job playing the character and there's some gore. But for me, I just need a little bit more than that. And this film doesn't really deliver on that front because of the script and the lack of depth for the characters and some other elements. And to the point where it honestly got dull. It got dull and kind of boring for me. And I really wasn't that thrilled. And I think with a better script, with stronger characters, and just a stronger overall story, it would be a lot more thrilling of an experience. And the intense moments would be so much more intense. Like if I got to know Dawn more, that death would have been even more powerful and even more impactful. If I got to know Tara more, that would be even more tragic. And the same thing goes for Victoria. Now, the cast, it has one standout, and it's David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. Everyone else pales in comparison considerably. Like David Howard Thornton is terrific. He's terrific as Art. This is a difficult character to pull off. He makes it look easy. It's not because he can't say anything. This is a role that requires some serious skill because you have to be a good physical comedian. You also have to be able to show a lot of things without saying a word, and you have to be a good mime, and he's able to do all of those very well. And it's an instantly iconic performance. I get it. I understand why some people look at Art the Clown and be like, that's a new horror icon. I get it. I get it now because of how good of a performance and how good this role is and how much David Howard Thornton brings this character to life and honestly only a way I think he could. Uh and the look of Art is also great. He still stands out and with the teeth and the black makeup and the face paint and the black and white aesthetic. It definitely is something that is quite stark when it comes to some scenes throughout the film. And Thornton adds a certain menacing mirth to it that just makes it fun to watch despite the brutality of the violence. Now, the rest of the characters, though, the rest of the actors, I really didn't think were that great. Um, Other than Corey Duvall, who played the coroner, that guy was the best performer out of anyone other than David Howard Thornton. Because Jenna Kanell as Tara, she's not really the best actress. She's hot, definitely has that hot goth girl look, and definitely, pushes those particular buttons. But she's not a very good actress. So she doesn't have a ton of charisma, doesn't have a lot of charm. The script doesn't really do a lot to help her either, to be fair, but her line delivery isn't very good. And then you have Samantha Scaffidi, who plays Victoria, not much better as Tara's sister. And Catherine Corcoran as Dawn. She was arguably the worst performer out of all of them, especially when she was trying to be funny. She was just downright cringe when she was trying to be funny, her character. Puya Moshini is Cat Lady. It's a pretty poo-worthy performance. Pretty smelly. Kind of performance that belongs in the litter box. Uh Matt McAllister as Mike the Exterminator, completely bland. Katie McGuire as Monica Brown, the interviewer at the beginning, just charmless. So yeah, a lot of these performances just really weren't that great. So that's another thing that hurts this movie is that you have acting that's pretty poor other than David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. And then they don't have the charm and the charisma to make up for their lack of acting skills, like other slasher films have had when it comes to their casts. The cinematography by George Stuber, it's serviceable enough, and so is the editing by Damien. The music by Paul Wiley, I appreciate the approach to make it more synth heavy, but at times it sounds too much like it's ripping off John Carpenter from Halloween. So I would have liked to have honestly heard some notes and some compositions that were more of its own thing and not just a knockoff. Because that's really what it felt like. It sounded like a knockoff of John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, and not really its own thing when it comes to the score. And a little too heavily over reliant upon bass, to the point where it was honestly something that kind of hurt some of the scenes that it was in, because the bass was a bit too overwhelming. It's like 85 minutes, but it drags because the plot isn't really much and the characters are very thin in terms of their development. So there's really not a lot for you to get that invested in other than waiting to see what Art the Clown is going to do next or waiting for the next kill. But like I said, I've seen much worse slashers. I've seen much worse horror films. And it's not completely terrible. Like I said, there are some things about it that are interesting, and Damien does some stuff that I like when it comes to Art the Clown, and him using a gun and him making his own weapons and him having this demented, twisted sense of humor, and the film definitely does perk up when it comes to scenes with art, but it just isn't as good when it comes to everything else. So it's just one of those movies where like, yeah, Art the Clown is great and there's some good gore, but that's honestly about it when it comes to some greatness or moments where this film actually uh, reaches the pinnacle, so to speak, or its peak when it comes to its potential. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on Terrifier. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.